Jake Morrison walked through the long hallway that led to the main council chamber. His footsteps echoed off the smooth walls made of some alien metal that shined like silver. The Galactic Council building was huge and impressive, designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. Today, Jake felt neither small nor impressed, just tired of the same old arguments. The council chamber doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing the semicircle of alien representatives who controlled most of the known galaxy. Each species sat in their special seats designed for their different body types. The Zenthari looked like walking crystals with their clear, hard skin that caught the light. The Vek had long tentacles instead of arms and big round eyes that never seemed to blink. The Draken were the scariest looking, with their thick scales and sharp teeth that they showed when they talked. Jake took his place at the small podium in the center of the room. He had stood here many times before, always trying to explain why humans did things differently. Today felt different, though, like something important was about to happen. Council leader Zethkar stood up from his crystal throne. His voice rang through the chamber like breaking glass. Ambassador Morrison, we have called you here to discuss the continuing problem of human expansion and behavior. Jake nodded, but said nothing. He had learned that staying quiet often made the aliens more uncomfortable than arguing back. Your species refuses to follow our rules, continued the Zenthari leader. You build colonies without asking permission. You create new technology without sharing it with the council. You make deals with other species without telling us first. High Commander Vextal of the Draken Federation slammed his clawed hand on his chair. Humans are dangerous. You grow too fast and think you know better than species who have been traveling space for thousands of years. Dr. Yelmora of the Vec Collective waved her tentacles in agreement. The human approach to science is reckless. You experiment with forces you do not understand. Your quantum research could destroy entire star systems. Jake listened to each, complaint without changing his expression. These were the same arguments he had heard for the past 5 years. The council was afraid of humans because they could not control them. Other species asked permission for everything and followed rules that were written before humans even discovered fire. Humans just did what needed to be done. Furthermore, Zethkar continued, your diplomatic methods are unacceptable. You negotiate directly with species without going through proper council channels. You have created trade agreements that bypass our authority. The complaints went on for over an hour. Every council member had something to say about how humans were causing problems. They talked about the human colony on Kepler 7 that had turned a dead planet into a garden world in just 3 years. They complained about human doctors who had found cures for diseases that had killed millions of aliens for centuries. They were angry about human engineers who had designed faster ships and better weapons. What really bothered them was that other species were starting to ask humans for help instead of going to the council first. Young alien scientists wanted to work with human researchers. Struggling colonies begged for human terraforming technology. Even some council member species had quietly made deals with human companies. Finally, Zethkar raised his hand for silence. The Galactic Council has reached a decision. Humanity has 30 standard days to change its behavior completely. Jake felt his stomach tighten but kept his face calm. All human colonies must accept council oversight. All human research must be shared with council scientists. All human trade agreements must be approved by council authority. All human military technology must be turned over to council defense forces. The chamber was completely quiet. Even the usual background hum of the building's systems seemed to stop. If humanity refuses these demands, Vextal added with a growl, the council will impose economic sanctions. We will ban human ships from all council space. We will stop all trade with human worlds. If necessary, we will use military force to make humans obey. Jake stood quietly for a long moment, looking at each alien face. Some looked angry, others looked smug, and a few actually looked sad about what they were doing. but none of them looked like they understood what they had just started. "I will take your message back to Earth," Jake said in a calm voice. "The human government will consider your demands carefully." "You have 30 days," Zethkar repeated. "Not one day more." Jake nodded once and turned to leave. As he walked back down the long hallway, he was already thinking about the coded message he would send to Earth. The Council had finally pushed too hard, and they were about to learn what happened when you tried to cage a species that valued freedom above everything else. Behind him, the Council members were already celebrating their victory, not knowing they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The message from Earth came back in just 2 days, much faster than anyone expected. It was short and simple, nothing like the long diplomatic letters that usually flew between governments. Captain Amy Chen read it 3 times to make sure she understood correctly. "All human personnel are to return home immediately. Begin shutdown procedures for all operations outside Earth space. Execute Order 7. Amy had never heard of Order 7 before, but the computer system recognized it right away. Secret files appeared on her screen with detailed instructions that had been written years ago, just in case something like this ever happened. The plans were so complete and careful that Amy realized the human government had been preparing for this day for a long time. Within hours, something amazing started happening across the entire galaxy. On research stations, human scientists began packing their equipment into special containers. On alien worlds, human engineers started shutting down the machines they had built. On space stations and trading posts, human merchants closed their shops and loaded their goods onto ships. Dr. Ben Rodriguez was working late in his lab on the VEC station called Deep Thought when his computer chimed with the new orders. He looked around at the quantum field generators he had spent 3 years building. The machines were his greatest achievement, devices that could manipulate the basic forces of reality itself. The VEC scientists had tried to understand his work but could never grasp the mathematical principles behind it. "Computer, begin data wipe protocol alpha," Ben said quietly. The machines hummed as they erased all traces of human knowledge from their memory banks. He packed his personal research notes into a sealed case and left behind only the basic instruction manuals that the VEC had insisted they could handle alone. His VEC partner, Krell Oth, rushed into the lab with his tentacles, waving frantically. "Ben, what are you doing? The quantum resonance experiment is scheduled for tomorrow." "I'm afraid you'll have to run it without me," Ben replied, sealing the last of his equipment cases. "All human staff are being recalled to Earth." "But the calculations, the field harmonics. We cannot operate the generators without your expertise." Ben handed Krell Oth a basic manual. "Everything you need is in there. Good luck." The same scene played out on thousands of worlds and stations. Human doctors like Sarah Walsh packed up their medical equipment and deleted their research files. They left behind alien patients who had been depending on human treatments for diseases that no other species could cure. Sarah felt terrible about leaving, but her orders were clear and urgent. On the trading station crossroads, human merchant Pete Johnson closed his cargo bay doors for the last time. His business had connected 12 different species in a trading network that brought prosperity to everyone involved. Alien traders watched in confusion as Pete loaded his valuable goods onto his ship. "Where are you going?" asked Vorthak, a Dracon trader who had become wealthy thanks to Pete's connections. "The shipment of quantum crystals is arriving tomorrow." "You'll have to handle that yourself," Pete replied, starting up his ship's engines. "My trading license has been revoked." Most dramatic shutdowns happened on the terraformed worlds where humans had turned dead rocks into living planets. On New Eden, a former desert world that now had green forests and blue lakes, human technician Lisa Park began the shutdown sequence for the atmospheric processors. These massive machines kept the air breathable and the weather stable, but they needed constant human oversight to function properly. Her alien supervisor, Yith Corona, watched in horror as Lisa powered down system after system. You cannot leave. Without the atmospheric processors, this world will become uninhabitable again. The basic systems will keep running for a few months, Lisa explained. After that, you'll need to figure out how to maintain them yourselves. But we do not understand how they work. The technology is too advanced for our engineers. Lisa handed her a thick manual and a storage device. Everything is documented. If you study hard, you might be able to keep them running. Human military advisors quietly left alien defense installations, taking with them the secret codes and protocols that made advanced weapon systems work. Human pilots shut down their ships and transferred them to automated systems that were only half as effective. Human communications experts powered down the networks that had connected distant parts of the galaxy for the first time in history. The strangest part was how quiet it all was. Humans didn't make angry speeches or threats. They didn't demand apologies or try to negotiate better terms. They just packed their things, said polite goodbyes, and left. Ships bearing Earth's flag departed from every corner of Council space, heading back toward the small blue world where humanity had started its journey to the stars. Captain Alex Turner sent the same message to every alien port authority. Human shipping contracts are now terminated. Thank you for your business. His cargo ship New Horizon had been carrying vital supplies between worlds that couldn't trade directly with each other because of old conflicts and cultural differences. Without human ships to carry goods and human negotiators to arrange deals, these trade routes simply stopped working. Ambassador Jake Morrison was among the last to leave, shutting down the human embassy on the Council homeworld. He transmitted one final message to the Galactic Council. The human delegation appreciates the opportunity to participate in galactic affairs. We wish you success in your future endeavors. By the end of the first week, the evacuation was nearly as complete. Hundreds of human ships formed long convoys heading back to Earth space, leaving behind empty buildings, silent machines, and very confused aliens who were just beginning to realize what they had lost. 2 weeks after the last human ship disappeared from Council space, the first problems began to show themselves. On the beautiful world of Garden Prime, where the Zenthari had built their most important agricultural colony, the atmospheric processors started making strange noises. Chief Engineer Yith Corona stood in the main control room, staring at warning lights that had never come on before. The machines that kept Garden Prime's air breathable were incredibly complex. They took the thin, poisonous atmosphere that the planet had naturally and converted it into the rich, oxygen-filled air that most species needed to survive. The human engineer Lisa Park had designed these processors using principles that seemed simple when she explained them. But now that she was gone, nobody could understand how they actually worked. The nitrogen levels are dropping, reported technician Velthara, her crystal fingers dancing over controls that suddenly seemed foreign and complicated. The oxygen generators are overheating. Yith Corona picked up the manual that Lisa had left behind. The pages were filled with mathematical equations and technical diagrams that made no sense to Zenthari minds. Their species was good at many things, but the kind of creative engineering that humans did so easily was completely beyond them. Contact the VEC Collective, Yith Corona ordered. Perhaps their scientists can help us understand these systems, but the VEC were having their own problems. On the research station Deep Thought, Dr. Kreloth stared at the quantum field generators that Dr. Ben Rodriguez had left behind. The machines were still running, but they were slowly drifting out of calibration. Every few hours, the quantum fields became a little less stable, and Kreloth had no idea how to fix them. The instruction manual that Ben had left was written in simple language, but it assumed knowledge that the VEC simply didn't have. Ben had developed new mathematical theories during his 3 years on the station, theories that were so advanced that even the brilliant VEC scientists couldn't follow them. The field harmonics are degrading, Kreloth reported to his supervisor. If we cannot recalibrate the generators, the entire experiment will collapse and possibly damage the station. The supervisor waved his tentacles helplessly. Have you Tried following the manual? I have read it 17 times. The mathematics are incomprehensible. Dr. Rodriguez made discoveries that are beyond our current understanding of physics. Meanwhile, in Draken space, military commanders were discovering their own terrible problems. Admiral Krextos stood on the bridge of the flagship Iron Claw, watching his tactical display flicker and show nonsense information. The advanced battle management computers that had made the Draken fleet the most feared military force in the galaxy were failing one by on. Sir, the targeting systems are giving false readings, reported Weapons Officer Gorthak. The quantum targeting array is completely offline. What did the human technicians do to our computers before they left? Krextos growled. Nothing, sir. That's the problem. The systems require constant updates and calibration. The human software engineers wrote programs that modify themselves based on changing conditions, but without human oversight, the programs are becoming corrupted. The Dracon had always prided themselves on their military might, but they were discovering that their strength had come largely from human technology that they had never truly understood. Human programmers had integrated their artificial intelligence systems so deeply into Dracon computers that removing the human element caused everything to break down. Trade was collapsing just as quickly. Captain Steve Walsh had been the coordinator for the Tri-System Trade Alliance, a network that connected dozens of worlds in profitable commerce. Without human ships to carry goods and human negotiators to arrange deals, the entire system fell apart in days. On the industrial world of Factory 7, Supervisor Mothron watched his production lines shut down one by one. "Where are the quantum crystals from the Vec worlds?" he demanded. "The shipping route is no longer operating," his assistant explained. "The human traders were the only ones who could navigate the asteroid fields between our systems safely." "Then contact the Draken military. They can escort our ships." The EA Draken are refusing all escort missions. They say their navigation computers are malfunctioning and they cannot guarantee safe passage. The problems spread like a disease through council space. Medical facilities found themselves unable to treat patients with exotic diseases because human doctors had taken their advanced knowledge with them. Research projects that had been running for years ground to a halt because key human scientists were no longer available. Communication networks failed because human technicians had designed systems that were too complex for other species to maintain. On the Council homeworld, emergency meetings began happening every day. Council leader Zethkar found himself facing reports of disaster from every corner of the galaxy. His crystal form was developing stress fractures, a sure sign that he was under enormous pressure. "The situation is worse than we thought," reported Trade Minister Yelkoth. "Human involvement in our economy was much deeper than our analysis had suggested. They were not just participants, they were the foundation that everything else was built on." "That cannot be correct," Zethkar insisted. "We have been traveling space for millennia before humans even discovered fire. How could such a young species become so important so quickly?" Defense Minister Vex Null provided the answer. "Because they did things differently than we do. Where we follow established procedures, humans improvised and innovated. Where we sought permission and approval, humans simply solved problems. We became dependent on their creativity without realizing it. The most frightening realization was that the humans had not sabotaged anything when they left. They had simply taken their knowledge and skills with them, leaving behind systems that worked perfectly as long as someone with human-level creativity was available to maintain them. Without that human touch, everything was slowly breaking down." "Sir," reported Communications Officer Dralek, "we have tried to contact the human government 17 times. All messages receive the same automated response saying that Earth is reviewing its diplomatic status." Zethkar felt another crack form in his crystal skin. The Council had issued an ultimatum expecting humans to submit and obey. Instead, the humans had walked away, and now the entire galactic civilization was collapsing without them. By the fourth week after the human departure, what had started as minor technical problems had grown into a full galactic crisis. On Garden Prime, the atmospheric processors had finally shut down completely. The once beautiful world was slowly reverting to its original poisonous atmosphere, and the Zenthari colonists were preparing for evacuation. Chief Engineer Yith Corona made her final report to the Colonial Administration. "We have attempted to restart the processors 47 times using the human manual. Each attempt has resulted in system failure. Without Dr. Park's expertise, we cannot maintain the atmospheric balance required for life." The evacuation ships were already loading desperate colonists who had called Garden Prime home for over a decade. Children who had been born on the terraformed world would never see their home again. The beautiful forests and lakes that humans had created were dying, returning to the dead wasteland that the planet had been before human technology transformed it. Similar disasters were happening across Council space. On 3 other terraformed worlds, atmospheric systems were failing one by one. The Zenthari had built their colonial expansion on human terraforming technology, never learning how to maintain the complex systems themselves. Now their entire colonial empire was collapsing. The economic damage was even worse. The Galactic Stock Exchange had lost 60% of its value as trade networks collapsed. Planets that had depended on imported food were facing starvation. Medical supplies were running low on worlds where local diseases required treatments that only human doctors had understood. On the trading hub of Commerce Central, Director Velthok watched his screens show red warning symbols from every sector. "The shipping routes to the Outer Rim have completely collapsed," he reported to his board of directors. "Without human pilots who knew how to navigate the quantum storm regions, we have lost contact with 14 systems." "What about using automated ships?" suggested board member Yithmar. "We tried that. The artificial intelligence systems that controlled automatic navigation were designed by humans. Without human programmers to update and maintain them, the ships keep getting lost or crashing into asteroids. The most devastating problems were happening in the Vec Collective's territory. Their entire civilization was built around massive, quantum computer networks that managed everything from food distribution to climate control. These computers had been enhanced with human artificial intelligence programs that made them incredibly powerful. But now those same programs were becoming corrupted. On the Vec homeworld, System Administrator Krelthon watched helplessly as critical infrastructure began failing. "The central processing cores are showing cascade errors," he reported to the Collective Council. "The human-designed AI systems are modifying themselves in ways we cannot predict or control." "Can we not simply remove the human programs?" asked Councillor Dralvin. "Impossible! The human code is integrated into every system at the foundational level. Removing it would cause total system collapse. We would lose power, water, air recycling, and food production across all our worlds simultaneously." The Vec faced a terrible choice. Watch their computers slowly become unreliable, or shut them down completely and watch their civilization collapse immediately. Either way, they were helpless without human expertise to fix the problems. Military forces across the galaxy were discovering that their weapons were becoming useless. The Dracon Federation's proud fleet of warships was barely functional. "Admiral?" Krextos received reports that made his blood run cold. "Sir, we have lost weapons capability on 60% of our fleet," reported his aide. "The quantum targeting systems are completely offline. The shield generators are running at 30% efficiency. Our battle computers can no longer coordinate attacks between multiple ships." "How is this possible?" Krextos demanded. "These are Dracon systems built with Dracon technology." "With respect, sir, that is not accurate. Investigation reveals that human engineers upgraded our systems so thoroughly that they are no longer recognizable as original Dracon technology. The humans made our weapons 10 times more effective, but they also made them completely dependent on human maintenance. Even worse, The Draken were discovering that they could no longer coordinate their military forces effectively. Human communications specialists had designed the networks that allowed instant communication across vast distances. Without those networks, military commanders could not talk to their ships or coordinate battle strategies. The crisis reached a breaking point when the medical emergency on Healing Station Alpha became public knowledge. The station was the galaxy's premier medical facility, where the most advanced treatments were developed and tested. Dr. Sarah Walsh had been the chief researcher there, developing treatments for quantum radiation poisoning that had saved millions of lives. "We are facing a pandemic," announced Medical Director Yeltharian in a galaxy-wide broadcast. "The quantum radiation treatments are no longer effective. Without Dr. Walsh's research and expertise, we cannot synthesize the necessary medications. 14 systems are reporting outbreaks of radiation sickness that we cannot treat." The broadcast sent panic through every corner of Council space. Quantum radiation was a common hazard of space travel and industrial operations. Without effective treatments, millions of workers would die and space travel would become impossibly dangerous. On the Council homeworld, emergency sessions were happening around the clock. Council leader Zethkar was barely holding together, both physically and mentally. His crystal form was covered in stress fractures, and his voice had become weak and cracked. "We must contact the humans immediately," he announced to the emergency assembly. "We cannot allow pride to destroy galactic civilization." High Commander Vextal still resisted. "If we back down now, we will lose all authority. Every species in the galaxy will know that humans defeated the Council without firing a single shot." "Sir," interrupted a junior aide, "we have just received word that the Aquatic Confederation is attempting to contact Earth directly, bypassing the Council completely. They are offering to trade water rights for human medical assistance." The news hit the Council like a shockwave. If individual species started making their own deals with humans, the Council would become completely irrelevant. The very organization that had tried to control humanity was about to be destroyed by humanity's absence. Communications Officer Dralek added more bad news. "Sir, we have intercepted similar messages from the Silicon Brotherhood, the Gas Giant Alliance, and the Deep E Space Mining Consortium. Everyone is trying to contact humans directly." Zethkar realized that the Council had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed humans needed them more than they needed humans. But the opposite was true. Without human innovation, creativity, and problem-solving abilities, galactic civilization was falling apart. By the 6th week, the situation had become so desperate that even the proudest Council members were ready to beg. Council leader Zethkar stood before the emergency assembly, his crystal body now completely covered in stress fractures that made him look like he might shatter at any moment. The great chamber that had once been filled with confident alien leaders now echoed with fear and desperation. "We have no choice," Zethkar announced, his voice barely above a whisper. "We must contact Earth and request immediate assistance. Our civilization is collapsing without human support." The admission sent shocked silence through the chamber. For thousands of years, the Council species had considered themselves the masters of the galaxy. They had built mighty empires, conquered star systems, and developed technologies that seemed miraculous. The idea that they could be brought to their knees by the absence of one young species was almost impossible to accept. High Commander Vextal of the Draken Federation was the first to speak. "This is humiliating beyond measure, but our military forces are now operating at 15% effectiveness. We cannot defend our own territory, let alone maintain order in Council space. 3 pirate fleets have already attacked our outer colonies, knowing that our response capabilities are crippled." Dr. Yelmora of the Vec Collective waved her tentacles in agitation. "Our quantum computer networks are failing faster each day. The human artificial intelligence programs that enhanced our systems are now actively corrupting our data. We estimate total system collapse within 2 weeks if we cannot get human technicians to repair the damage." Trade Minister Yelkoth provided the economic figures that made everyone's spirits sink even lower. The Galactic Stock Exchange has lost 85% of its value. Unemployment is reaching critical levels on 47 worlds. Food riots have started on 6 planets, where the disrupted trade networks have caused supply shortages. The most devastating report came from Medical Director Yeltharian, who appeared via emergency transmission from Healing Station Alpha. The quantum radiation pandemic is spreading faster than we can track. Without human medical expertise, we are helpless against diseases that we once considered easily treatable. The death toll is approaching 1 million beings and rising exponentially. Zethkar felt another crack form in his crystal skin as he absorbed the scope of the disaster. What are our options for contacting the human government? Communications. Officer Dralek stepped forward with more bad news. Sir, we have sent over 200 messages to Earth through every available channel. All communications receive the same automated response stating that the human government is reviewing its diplomatic status. We have attempted to contact human colonies, human trading posts, and even individual human citizens, but they all refer us back to Earth's government. What about going to Earth directly? Suggested Defense Minister Vexnall. Impossible, sir. Human space is now completely closed to Council ships. They have activated some kind of defense grid that prevents any non-human vessel from entering their territory. Our scouts report that human ships patrol the borders and politely but firmly turn away all visitors. The Council was discovering that humans had been much better prepared for this situation than anyone had realized. While the aliens had been focused on maintaining their authority and following ancient protocols, humans had been quietly planning for the possibility that they might need to leave Council space entirely. Emergency reports continued flowing in from across the galaxy. On the industrial world of Factory 7, production had dropped to 10% of normal levels because the quantum-powered manufacturing systems could not function without human oversight. On the research station Deep Thought, experiments that had been running for decades were shutting down as equipment failed and no one could figure out how to repair it. The terraformed worlds were becoming uninhabitable one by one. Garden Prime had already been evacuated, and 3 other worlds were preparing for emergency evacuations as their atmospheric systems failed. Millions of colonists were becoming refugees, fleeing worlds that had been their homes for generations. Sir, reported Agricultural Minister Mothvin, we are facing a food crisis of unprecedented proportions. The agricultural worlds that fed our major population centers all used human-designed growing systems. Without human agricultural specialists, crop yields are dropping catastrophically. Even the Council's attempts to maintain basic order were failing. On the diplomatic station Harmony Point, Ambassador Velthara of the Aquatic Confederation reported that negotiations between species had completely broken down. The humans served as mediators and translators between species that could barely communicate with each other. Without human diplomats to bridge our cultural differences, we cannot reach agreements on even the simplest issues. The most frightening development was that some species were starting to consider military action to force humans to return. Admiral Krextos presented a battle plan that made everyone in the chamber uncomfortable. We could assemble a joint fleet and threaten human colonies, he suggested. Force them to provide the technical assistance we need. With what fleet? Asked High Commander Vextel bitterly. Our ships cannot target accurately, communicate effectively, or navigate safely without human technology. We would be sending broken ships operated by confused crews against the species that designed half our systems in the first place. The truth was slowly becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. Humans had not conquered the galaxy through force or threats. They had made themselves indispensable through competence and innovation. They had solved problems that other species could not solve, created technologies that other species could not duplicate, and provided services that other species could not replace. Sir, announced Intelligence Chief Yithmar, we have confirmed reports that 14 minor species have successfully contacted human representatives outside of Council space. The humans appear to be establishing new relationships with species that are willing to deal with them as equals rather than subjects. The final blow came when Communications Officer Dralek reported the most devastating news of all. "Sir, we have intercepted a transmission from the Free Worlds Alliance, a new organization formed by species that have left Council space entirely. They are offering membership to any world that wants to establish direct relationships with humans and other innovative species." Zethkar realized that the Council was not just facing a crisis, they were facing extinction. The organization that had controlled galactic politics for millennia was being replaced by something new, something that valued cooperation over control and innovation over tradition. The humans had not just left the Council, they had started building something better to replace it. 8 weeks after the humans had quietly departed, Council leader Zethkar found himself making the most humiliating communication of his long career. He stood alone in the Council chamber, his crystal body so covered with stress fractures that he looked like a broken statue. The other Council members had refused to participate in what they saw as the final surrender of their authority. The transmission to Earth was broadcast on all frequencies so that every species in the galaxy could witness the moment when the mighty Galactic Council begged for mercy from the species they had tried to control. "To the human government and people of Earth," Zethkar began, his voice cracking with each word. "The Galactic Council formally requests the immediate return of human participation in galactic affairs. We acknowledge that our previous ultimatum was issued in error and wish to establish new terms of cooperation that respect human autonomy and contributions to galactic civilization." The words felt like poison in his mouth, but they were necessary. Without human expertise, galactic civilization was collapsing completely. The quantum radiation pandemic had killed over 2 million beings. Terraformed worlds were becoming uninhabitable wastelands. Trade networks had failed so completely that some systems were facing starvation. Military forces could barely maintain order as pirates and rebels took advantage of weakened defenses. The response came not from Earth's government, but from a simple cargo ship captain named Steve Walsh. His vessel appeared on the edge of Council space, broadcasting on all frequencies so that every species could hear his words. Steve was not a diplomat or a government official, just a regular human who had been quietly organizing something remarkable while the Council struggled with their crisis. "On behalf of the human species, I want to thank the Galactic Council for their message," Steve said in a calm, friendly voice that somehow made his words more powerful than any angry speech could have been. "We appreciate the Council's willingness to reconsider their previous position." He paused, and in that silence, billions of beings across the galaxy held their breath. "However, during these past 8 weeks, we have discovered something interesting. We have learned that we don't actually need the Council as much as we thought we did. In fact, we have found that we get along quite well without Council oversight and restrictions." Steve's ship transmitted data files that showed what humans had been doing during their absence from Council space. They had not been sitting quietly on Earth feeling sorry for themselves. Instead, they had been building something entirely new. "We have established new trade relationships with 47 species who contacted us directly, bypassing the Council completely. We have formed research partnerships with scientists from 18 different worlds who were tired of waiting for Council approval to pursue innovative projects. We have created defense agreements with 23 systems who wanted protection, but did not want to surrender their independence to Council military forces." The data showed a thriving network of cooperation and commerce that had grown up in just 8 weeks. Species that had never been allowed to interact directly under Council rules were now working together on projects that benefited everyone. Worlds that had been struggling under Council taxation and restrictions were now prospering as members of what humans called the Free Alliance. "The most interesting discovery," Steve continued, "was how many species have been unhappy with Council rule, but were afraid to speak up because they thought they had no alternative. It turns out that when you give intelligent beings the freedom to make their own choices, they do remarkable things. On the Council homeworld, emergency reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Entire star systems were declaring independence from Council authority and requesting membership in the human-led Free Alliance. The Council was not just losing the humans, they were losing everyone. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Dralek in a panicked voice, "the Aquatic Confederation has formally withdrawn from the Council. They are relocating their government to a human-protected system. The Silicon Brotherhood has announced they are joining the Free Alliance. The Deep Space Mining Consortium is refusing to pay council taxes and has hired human security firms for protection." Steve Walsh's broadcast continued with an offer that was both generous and devastating. "The Council species are welcome to join the Free Alliance if they wish. We believe in cooperation between equals rather than rule by the powerful over the weak. However, if you choose to join us, you will be member species, not ruling species. Everyone gets one vote regardless of how long they have been traveling space or how many worlds they control." The offer hit the Council members like a physical blow. They could join the new galactic order, but only as equals among many rather than as the supreme rulers they had always been. For species that had considered themselves the masters of the galaxy for thousands of years, the idea of becoming just another voice in a democratic alliance was almost impossible to accept. High Commander Vextall tried one last desperate threat. "If humans continue to undermine Council authority, we will be forced to take military action." Steve's response was devastating in its simplicity. "With what military? Your ships cannot navigate, target, or communicate effectively without human technology. Your weapons systems are failing, your defense grids are offline, and your soldiers cannot coordinate attacks. You have spent so much effort ruling others that you forgot how to take care of yourselves." The truth of those words was proven within hours when a small pirate fleet attacked a Draken military base and completely overwhelmed the defenses. The mighty Dracon Federation, once the most feared military force in the galaxy, could not even protect their own territory. 3 months later, the Galactic Council held its final session. One by one, member species had abandoned the Council to join the Free Alliance or form their own independent governments. The Grand Chamber, that had once hosted thousands of representatives, now held only a few dozen beings from species too proud or too stubborn to admit they had been wrong. Zethkar made the final announcement. "The Galactic Council hereby dissolves itself. We recommend that all remaining member species pursue individual relationships with the Free Alliance or other appropriate organizations." The new galactic order was not ruled by humans, despite their central role in creating it. Instead, it was governed by a council where every species had equal representation and every decision required broad consensus. Humans served as mediators, innovators, and problem solvers, but they did not rule. Ambassador Jake Morrison, now representing Earth in the Free Alliance Council, often reflected on how dramatically things had changed. The species that had once demanded human submission now competed to attract human settlers, researchers, and businesses to their worlds. The technologies that had once been seen as dangerous were now recognized as solutions to problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. The former Council species eventually joined the Free Alliance as well, humbled but wiser. They learned to contribute their own strengths while respecting the contributions of others. They discovered that cooperation produced better results than domination, and that freedom was more valuable than control. Years later, historians would study the 8 weeks that changed galactic civilization forever. They would call it the Quiet Revolution, the period when humanity proved that sometimes the most powerful response to an ultimatum is simply to walk away and build something better.